Over at BangTheBook.com, we're covering those 3 markets as well as several others. Tons of stuff going on over there at the website. Please check that out. We've got college football picks and previews for all of the bowl games. All of the NFL games for this week have been previewed as well. Daily NHL picks from Parker Michaels. We'll have some futures updates from Lockie Lockerson here with both the NBA and the NFL this week. Tons of stuff going on over there. My NFL Daily Fantasy went up today. College football news and notes update yesterday. My power ratings article is still up over there. Just posted a new NFL power ratings piece from Danny Vorgs. So tons and tons of stuff going on at bangthebook.com. We are your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. You can apply that to the contests that we have over there as well. Daily Streaker, monthly pick of the day, top monthly win percentage, top ROI, top number of units won, cash prizes for signing up for those free contests. Also, check out our sportsbook review section. Lots of sportsbooks listed over there. Exclusive promo codes for all of them, including the one for our friends over at DSI Sportsbook. If you use that promo code BTB and the number 25, you get a $25 free bet just for signing up. 100% deposit match bonus for the sportsbook and 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino as well. If you already have an account at DSI or you're looking to go somewhere else, we've got lots of reviews over there. You can check out the biggest names in the industry. 2 guests coming your way here on today's show. The first, Mr. Brad Powers from BradPowersSports.com. Brad, how's it going today, man?
It's going well. How you doing on this fine Thursday morning?
I'm doing well, buddy. Appreciate your time here, as always, on the show. We're going to talk a lot of bowl games. We're going to try to go through them in a little bit of rapid-fire fashion here so we can get your opinions on a lot of them. But before we start looking ahead, and we'll do that with Saturday's Birmingham Bowl to kick things off, so far we've had 7 bowl games, a couple of blowouts here the last 2 nights, some interesting results on Saturday. Anything surprise you so far? Anything that maybe you feel like you need to pay a little bit more attention to in the handicapping process?
No, not necessarily. Maybe should have went a little bit more dog heavy than what I did. That's maybe a little bit of a regret that I have. Maybe the lesson to be learned, and I think it's an important one. I think bowl season, provides a greater variance with results. So, sometimes you get more blowouts. And one thing, the Dogs have covered 5 of the first 7. That's not overwhelming, but all 5 have won via outright upset. So I think the lesson to be learned, since there is a lot more variance and volatility when it comes to a bowl game, whether it be motivation, coaching changes, or whatnot, if you're going to be betting dogs, I would say shade in a little bit of money, even dogs that are a touchdown on underdog. I'd shade in a little bit of a wager on the money line that'll help your bankroll out, in my opinion, just because I think that the chances of them not only covering but also winning outright are more than what they would be in a typical regular season game. And also, I would be very weary of laying money lines when it comes to college football bowl games because, we've seen a lot of favorites go down, and when you especially have a bigger favorite and the motivation is questionable, I know one thing, I'm not laying a lot of big money line favorites when it comes to bowl games.
So when you talk about sprinkling a little bit on the money line there, are you talking like a 60-40 split if we go off of one unit? Or are you talking 75-25? What would generally be your rule of thumb there?
Yeah, 60-40 is a little steep for me. 75-25 probably, I think is a pretty safe. 70-30, that's the first thing that came to my mind. 60-40 is a little steep. And you got to watch yourself. If you got a good dog, and obviously it also depends on how big the point spread is. I would tend to like to play money lines on the 2-point, 3-point, 4-point type of dogs, and a lot of those lines are right in there when it comes to bowl games. Those I'd be a little bit more aggressive than obviously your touchdown plus dogs.
All right, we've talked a lot about the Gasparilla Bowl and then also the Bahamas Bowl and the Potato Bowl, so we'll go ahead and bypass those here on today's show and start looking ahead to Saturday and then, of course, look ahead to next week as well, as now we're starting to get bowl games pretty hot and heavy. Got 1 tonight, 2 tomorrow, 3 on Saturday, 1 on Sunday, 3 next Tuesday, 4 next Wednesday. So we're starting to get a little bit higher frequency here with these bowl games. And Brad, let's go ahead and start with the Birmingham Bowl between Texas Tech and South Florida. And inherently, to me, this looks like a high-variance game because you've got this Texas Tech defense that is a lot better under David Gibbs. You have this South Florida team that had a cupcake schedule up until playing Central Florida, who they outplayed, but they still found a way to lose that game. They only went 9-2 this year, so they didn't really live up to expectations. Do you have a good pulse on this game, or is this one just too volatile for you?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. This one is high variance and volatile. Would not be a bit surprised either team win via blowout fashion, to be honest with you. South Florida, tough to get a gauge on them. They've only played, in my current power ratings, they've only played two teams right around in my top 50, and they lost both of them. One to Houston, and then obviously lost to Central Florida. Both were in the final second. Central Florida, that could be a kick return touchdown. Houston, I think, scored a touchdown with about 30 seconds left. Other than that, they played one of the weaker schedules in the entire country, and that's why a lot of people are buying them as the most likely representative for a group of 5 team to get a major bowl game. And at least that's what the preseason expectations were. Flip side, I mean, Texas Tech, you want to talk about this is a game of inches and whatnot as far as the program. If they don't get a late interception return that sets up a short field for a touchdown against Texas, obviously they're not only in this bowl game, but is Cliff Kingsbury coaching Texas Tech? I'm not necessarily sure, but they get the win outright against Texas in the finale, and now the excitement level is a little bit back there. They played a much tougher schedule. You're right, the defense has been much improved this year, but it'll be interesting because I watched South Florida go up and down the field against an SEC defense in South Carolina last year in this very bowl game. It was a track meet. As long as the weather holds out, I'm going to lean with the over, and also if I'm getting the full field goal, I'm going to lean on Texas Tech, but nothing that I'm going to get too overwhelmingly involved. I think there's a lot better value options out there.
No, I think so too. And this one's interesting. We saw a move to Pinnacle, obviously one of the sharper offshores in the marketplace, up to the 3 last night around 6:30 or so. It's held to that point now through the morning hours here. We've got Bovada up to 3 -15 on the favorite. Not a big surprise here to see South Florida being the public team here with Charlie Strong, and of course, a team that has done very well over the last couple of seasons with some of the star power that they have. So we're finally starting to see some movement here on this game. So from the looks of it, Brad, if you're a Texas Tech backer, you probably have some time to wait on this one, because if Texas Tech is the side for the sharp guys, they won't play it until Saturday. So you've got some time to maybe see if a 3.5 does happen to pop somewhere.
Yeah, and I mean, if you believe in public betting percentages, South Florida, one of the more popular plays, at least early on in the bowl season, getting well over 70% of the tickets. So, yeah, I would say I would wait. And keep in mind, when it comes to bowl games, I wouldn't overreact too much, because I would say at least 75% of the handle on a particular bowl game isn't happening until the final 24 hours leading up to it. So whatever we've seen so far, I would consider more sharp than public. But in this particular instance, I think the pro money will come in on Texas Tech, but they're just waiting to see if they can pull that 3.5 out there. And again, you're right. Even bookmaker just now went to -3, -115. I think the chances are pretty solid now that Texas Tech. I think you might be able to get a 3.5 out there at some point here in the next couple of days.
And even a 3 with reduced juice, if you get a 3 even or a 3 -05, something like that, we talk about those break-even percentages, and that's something that Brent from DSI Sportsbook talks about with sharp guys. Those 5 cents, those 10 cents of juice, really, really significant. The spread doesn't move, but when the juice does, it still helps your break-even percentage. So that will be a line to watch here as we go forward. Another bowl game where we saw a little bit of movement last night, and again, specifically at Pinnacle, which is a very good gauge of what's going on out there in the marketplace. Army and San Diego State now down to 6 at several shops, 6.5 with some extra juice on the Knights as a dog here at some other ones. But, man, this looks like a pretty interesting handicap for a variety of different reasons in the Armed Forces Bowl.
I don't agree with the line move, and maybe I'm just missing something here, but you give me Rocky Long with extra time to prep for the option. He's 14-1 straight up since 2010, 11-4 against the number. They prepped against 2 option teams this year, won and covered both games, played an option team in the regular season finale, have had an entire month to prep for this one. Army's only got 2 weeks. They're coming off one of their biggest wins that they've had. That's a 2-game winning streak against their rival Navy, and just as important as breaking it last year was the fact that they finally took home the Commander-in-Chief trophy for them, first time since 1996. I wonder if Army maybe look, it's a service academy, so motivation's always going to be there, but Is it going to be a 10 or the old Spinal Tap reference? Is it going up to 11 like it was in their last game against Navy? I don't think so. So I saw an Army team that was took advantage. Obviously, I mean, they basically had camouflage uniforms in the game against Navy where they wore all white and they played in a snowstorm, and they had problems stopping Perry, the best player on the field for Navy. If that's a dry surface, I mean, does he go for 300-plus yards? They bring it up because San Diego State, if you're having troubles, containing a guy like Perry from Navy, what are you going to do with the Penny from San Diego State, a guy that's run for over 2,000 yards? Is only about 100 yards away from breaking the single-season mark that Donnell Pumphrey had for San Diego State. I like the Aztecs here, and I also like their look in the bowl games the last couple of years. Absolutely dominating performances against Cincinnati and Houston, two of the more impressive bowl performances each of the last 2 years. I really like San Diego State. Don't understand the line move down to 6. In my opinion, I think they roll and beat the Army by double digits.
I like that, and I like the way that you're thinking about this game, too, because I think the trap that a lot of people are falling into out there is they're looking at this game, seeing a total in the mid-40s, knowing that both of these teams run the football a ton, and they're just out there grabbing the underdog points. And, that is a starting point for you to make, and I certainly understand that approach to the game. But when you start breaking this thing down, and you mentioned it, and you did a very good job of doing that, Rocky Long's seen the option a lot. San Diego State can basically do to Army what Army does to other teams. They can just milk the clock, control this game, keep that Army offense off the field. And if we're looking at this thing from an efficiency standpoint, because San Diego State can throw the ball a little bit more, and because Rocky Long has so much experience against the option, in a game with limited possessions, San Diego State has a pretty clear advantage in this game to me. And I think you're definitely on the right track with that handicap.
Yeah, and let's talk about how much one play can matter to a line. Say Navy's quarterback doesn't get tripped up. He's running for the end zone. He barely gets tripped up by a hustling defensive end. At that point, Navy goes up 17-7, probably win that game. What's this line, and what's the overall thought process of Army had they not won that game and got the 9 wins? And keep in mind, what people don't realize is the Army-Navy game has become one of the most watched college football games each year. I think it ranked number 6, believe it or not, behind we're talking the Big Ten championship game, the SEC championship game, Ohio State, Penn State, the Iron Bowl. I think the public overreacts to what they see in that isolated Army-Navy game. And had they lost that game, I'm intrigued with what the line would be. Would it be an extra half point? Would it be a full point? You're right, limited possessions. I got the stronger, the bigger, faster team. And look, Army just can't throw the football. I know they're an option team and don't like to run it, but compared to other option teams, even Navy and Air Force this year, they're extremely limited throwing the football. Meanwhile, you're right, efficiency aspect. Christian Chapman for San Diego State doesn't wow you, but he takes care of the football. And if he takes care of the football here, I again think San Diego State rolls.
And two, I mean, it's a great story for Army, and I'm very happy to see that program on a high note. It's awesome that they've beaten Navy twice in a row, and of course getting that Commander-in-Chief trophy for the first time in a very, very long time. But this is the worst Navy team that we've seen in the last several years. I mean, part of it's because they're playing better competition in the AAC, but another part of it is that they've had some significant quarterback turnover over the last 3 years, with Keenan Reynolds, who set basically every record in program history. This just isn't the same Navy team. So, I mean, it's great for Army, and I don't want to belittle their accomplishment, but like you're talking about there, reading too much into that one game, this is kind of a perfect storm where Army is getting a lot better, Navy's coming back to the pack. So it stands to reason that Army would win 2 straight here in this series. And now, we'll see what happens in the Armed Forces Bowl. But let's go to the Dollar General Bowl here. Pretty good group of 5 matchup. Appalachian State takes on Toledo. Toledo down to a touchdown favorite across the market. And there's some extra juice on Appalachian State. So appears that the sharp side here in this game, at least as we look a couple days in advance, is the underdog Mountaineers.
Yeah, and I agree with it. I just thought the number was a little pricey, and I did get involved on Appalachian State, the north of the touchdown at 7.5 and 8 is what I gave out to my clients and gave that one out early. Obviously, the general handicapping 101 take here, rematch of last year's bowl game between these two teams. Appalachian State won the game, basically a pick-em type of game. They won it on a last-second type of field goal. And really, Toledo, in my opinion, watching that game, and watching back on the film, outplayed Appalachian State. Appalachian State had a long kick return touchdown that really helped them out in that one. Now, Appalachian State, in my opinion, had a disappointing season. Even though they shared the Sun Belt crown, this is a team that season win total-wise was sitting at like 9.5. They only won 8 games, lost outright to UL Monroe, lost outright to like Massachusetts, came up short against Georgia and Wake Forest in non-conference action. Toledo, very consistent when you look at their losses. Miami game was a little bit misleading, and really their only really bad performance this season came on the road in Athens against Ohio. Other than that, Logan Woodsides is about as accurate quarterback as you'll see in college football the last couple of years. They're the better team. They're playing with revenge, but slightly in Appalachian State liked it a hell of a lot more at 7.5 and 8. My number on the game's right around Toledo 6-7. So at the current number, I'm not getting too involved.
This should be a really interesting game. Last year, as you mentioned, Appalachian State won 31-28. They had the ball for almost 36 minutes in that game, ran for nearly 300 yards on the Rockets, only passed for 119 yards in that game. So, Toledo probably going to make some pretty big adjustments here, especially in terms of defending the run. But when Toledo only runs 54 offensive plays, something is very, very wrong, and they still almost found a way to win the game. So, in that respect, I think when you kind of look at last year's matchup, look at what this Toledo team is known for, you would certainly expect them to play better here in this one. But like you said, Appalachian State, it was a disappointing year. I thought that they were in a pretty good spot there against Wake Forest. They were getting another one of those home games like the Miami game last year, but they were facing a more comparable opponent, almost pulled it out, couldn't do it, had some losses on games that they shouldn't have lost throughout the year. And a lot of people do like to back those teams that either struggled going into the bowl season or fell short of expectations. Appalachian State may be one of those dangerous type teams here for that reason alone.
Yeah, and one thing they finally did after those 2 losses, and that was really the bad 2-week spot that they had against Massachusetts and UL Monroe, that they reestablished the control of the line of scrimmage, really controlled the line of scrimmage against Georgia Southern, Georgia State, and Louisiana, far outrushing those 3 opponents. And, it'll be interesting because, looking at Toledo, what is Toledo? Logan Woodside gets all the credit, but this is also a very good rushing team. Ran for well over 200 yards on the season. Only 2 games that they struggled running the ball was against Miami, Florida, and against Ohio. It'd be interesting to see the stat line. I would say, Toledo gets over 200 yards. I think they win the game and might even win it comfortably. If they don't get the 200-yard mark, this could be another high-variance type of game where I wouldn't be stunned if Appalachian State pulled the outright upset.
All right, well, let's go to Christmas Eve here. Houston takes on Fresno State out in the Hawaii Bowl, and this is one of my favorite games to handicap year in and year out, as I mentioned on yesterday's show, because you got a Mountain West team that's accustomed to going out to Hawaii against an AAC team that is not accustomed to going out to Hawaii. Houston's still a 2.5-point favorite in spite of that.
Yeah, I think you're on to it. I'm leaning definitely with Fresno State here, and why the heck not? You look at the losses this team had. They only had 1 really bad performance this year hosting UNLV. That was the only head-scratching loss that they had. Otherwise, they lost on the road to Washington, Alabama, and Boise State and covered all 3. So this was a team that was very – when you're looking at, as far as variance, there wasn't a lot with them. They were one of the more consistent teams in the country, and kudos to the job Jeff Tedford did. It reminded me of what he did at Cal back in 2002. He inherited a 1-10 team, took him to 7-5. This year he inherits a 1-11 Fresno State team, manages a 9-4 record. One of the better coaching jobs we've seen. Fresno State perfect against the spread as an underdog this season, 6-0 against the number. Houston's offense really struggled away from home, averaging only 20 points per game. Fresno State defense held 7 of their final 9 opponents to 17 points or less. I like the under, but also like, the Fresno State here. And the biggest handicap and reason why, they've been there, done that. The Hawaii Bowl brings, like you said, a lot of distractions. Well, they already played and won this year against Hawaii. This is a young coach in Major Applewhite preparing his team for a bowl game. Yes, he did last year. It wasn't a good look against San Diego State, but we'll give him a pass there since he was kind of what I would consider an interim at that point. But, I think a young head coach with all those distractions, and maybe it's more of a pleasure trip instead of a business trip, Fresno State, in my opinion, is the play here and the under.
Yeah, I think so too. And this is definitely one of those games where I'd look to do something with the money line in this spot as well. I mean, obviously you take the 2.5 if you want to, but the money line I think is very attractive here in this spot as well. I mean, Fresno State was in Hawaii on November 11th. So they were just there. And it's still great. It's awesome to go to Hawaii, for a bowl game. And these are two warmer weather types of cities. So it's not like you're escaping the winter time or anything like that. Like a team like Ohio going to the Bahamas Bowl. But still, the fact remains that Fresno State's been through this year alone and then went and played on the road in Laramie against Wyoming the week after coming back from Hawaii and still won that game 13-7. It wasn't pretty, but they won and covered. And I think that's something that you look at when you look back at the body of work for a season. Games like that will show you just how good a team is. I don't think Houston has that signature gut check type of performance like Fresno State has. And I think those are intangible types of things that help you in this bowl setting.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the great thing about bowls, number one, you got extra time to prep and really do a really deep dive into these games. And, a unique thing not only when it comes to motivation and coaching, but also, I mean, since you're dealing with neutral site games, I like and look at how do the teams perform. And I know it's not a true road setting, but how do they perform away from home? And from what I saw from Fresno State so far this season, far better on the road than what I saw particularly from Houston's offense. Now, Houston does have a couple of solid wins. I mean, they beat Arizona early in the season, pulled the outright upset over South Florida, but I didn't see much continuity, especially from the quarterback spot. It looks like De'Ara King is where they want to go in the future as far as getting a more mobile guy similar to what they had with Greg Ward Jr. A couple years back. But I like seeing consistency. And I already said at the top here, we're dealing with a little bit higher variance than what we normally are during regular season games. And that's why a lot of times push comes to shove, I'm taking the more consistent team. And again, Fresno State, very consistent this year under Jeff Tedford.
All right, well, let's move to the Tuesday games here, the off day for the Bulls on Monday. There's a couple of NFL games that we'll talk about later on in today's show with Rolf Michaels on Christmas Day. But go to the Heart of Dallas Bowl, sponsored by Zaxby's. And for those that have never had Zaxby's, I'll give them my seal of approval here on today's show because I think their food is exceptional, but unfortunately there aren't any in this area. In any event, Utah's a 6.5, 7-point favorite here for this game. No Will Grier for the Mountaineers, and it looks like Tyler Huntley's going to be good to go for the Utes here. This number opened 4.5. Haven't really seen a whole lot of West Virginia money come back into the market.
No, and I'm leaning with Utah here. I'm not going to get too involved, but you're right. I mean, and we haven't quite seen what Will Grier really means to this team. We saw the one game against Oklahoma, and it wasn't a great look for West Virginia, although I don't know if it was going to be a great look even if Will Grier played for him in that particular. So I'm not sure. We definitely know how much he's worth to the line because it would be nice if you had a couple of more data points on the backup. Now, he's got 15 extra practices to get ready for this. I expect him to be a little bit more improved, but, also hurting them, their running back, Justin Crawford, is going to be out. And, again, Utah gets their quarterback. And I guess the rubber seal stamp why I'm going to lean with Utah, Kyle Whittingham is one of the better bowl coaches out there. I mean, 9-1 straight up, 7-3 against the spread. Dana Holgorsen, not one of my favorite coaches to begin with, and he's 1-4 against the number his 5 bowl games. I'm leaning anything under a touchdown with Utah minus the points.
Excuse me. I think what's really interesting about this game is that, normally you'd have this Utah team that plays this smash mouth power running type of style, which would be something very different for West Virginia because they don't see that in the Big 12. But now with Utah going a little bit more spread oriented, I wonder if that plays into West Virginia's defensive strength a little bit because, they don't have to try and replicate something that they can't do with a power running game here in these practices leading up to the bowl games. This is more of what they're used to seeing. I mean, there is a little bit more of a power component to it because Utah is just so strong and big in the trenches. But, from a preparation standpoint, this game, I think, does favor West Virginia a little bit more this season than it would, say, last season or in past years.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And look, I got why Kyle Whittingham did what he wanted on offense. He wanted to take that next step, tired of winning, 8-9 games and being, a consistent team. But it was actually a negative for him this year. They kind of lost their way, lost their identity. What made them so tough is, outside of Stanford, they were the most physical team in the Pac-12, and a lot of teams weren't used to playing that style. More teams are used to playing wide open spread offenses in college football. And I got to be honest with you, if I was a coach out there, I'd line them up multiple tight ends. I'd use a fullback. I would go more old school now, because that, to me, is more of an outlier offense that people just don't replicate enough. And that's why I think the Stanfords, the Michigan States, the San Diego States, schools like that, and recently have thrived on running the football and playing that old school, kind of not necessarily power I, but more of the pro style set that teams just don't run anymore. I think we'll see. I'll get an extra year of data point, but right now it hasn't been a great look for Utah, and you're exactly right. Just schematically and what they do on offense this year will help West Virginia as far as not getting run over in this bowl game.
But again, the problem here is we don't know what West Virginia is going to do offensively. They don't have Will Grier. They don't have Crawford. So, how bad does this offense look? We'll have to wait and see. And this is a game that probably is a candidate for live betting more so than doing anything here from a pregame standpoint. Let's go up to the fast track in Detroit at Ford Field for the Quick Lane Bowl. Northern Iowa takes on Duke. It's a bowl game that nobody's really talking about. I mean, I haven't seen this game get any type of press, any type of fanfare at all whatsoever. Duke opened 4.5. It's up to 5.5. So not a particularly significant move going through that dead number of 5 there. You got any opinion on this one, Brad?
I had one. I got a Duke minus 3.5 ticket. I thought the line was relatively cheap. I think the line's going to come down, though. So, I mean, if you want to take Northern Illinois, I think the pro money is going to be on Northern Illinois. I see a lot of nationally respected handicappers all over Northern Illinois in this one. I guess I get it. They're thinking Duke would rather be elsewhere, and I get it. Detroit, when you're an ACC team, isn't the favorite spot you want to be as far as the holidays. But, Duke was dead in the water at 4-6. They pull outright upsets each of their last 2 games to get here. So I think they're probably a little bit more excited than your typical ACC team. Northern Illinois, they competed well against Power 5 competition. I think they covered 7 of their last 8, but Rod Carey's terrible in bowl games, 0-4 straight up, 0-4 against the number, multiple blowout losses. And, you look at David Cutcliffe, they've covered each of their last 3 bowl games. The concern that I have is Duke usually is a dog in bowl games. This is the first time they've been a favorite in a bowl game since 1989, so that has me a little bit off of it. But, pure power innings, I played Duke early, minus 3.5. Thought the line would only go up. It did a couple of points, so I'm happy with that ticket. But, man, I'm telling you, right now at 5.5, I still lean Duke. But if you're wanting to bet the Northern Illinois camp, bet it now. I think the line drops.
That is a fascinating stat about Duke not being favored in a bowl game for in the last 18 years. Now, of course, I don't know, how many. Actually, 28 years. You said 1989, correct?
Yep, absolutely. They weren't in a lot of bowl games in the 90s and early 2000s, but it's good 6 or 7 of them.
Still, I think it's a good, noteworthy stat, and I kind of had one like that yesterday, that the Bears haven't won a game as a favorite under John Fox. They're 0-7 in that. So, again, it's not the largest of sample sizes necessarily, but it does illustrate what we've come to know about Duke, in that David Cutcliffe likes that David role, pardon the pun. He doesn't want to be Goliath. He doesn't want to be the favorite. He wants to be the team that nobody's talking about. Maybe it helps in this instance that no one's talking about this bowl game, but still, they are a better underdog-type team under Cutcliffe, with expectations here, with Northern Illinois having the shorter trip, more familiarity with this venue from, some past MAC championship games and things of that sort. Maybe this isn't an ideal spot for Duke, even though they are the better team.
Yeah, they are. And look, a misleading game against Army for them. Otherwise, I think they'd have finished the season with 3. And it was tough. And look, we talk about variance. That's kind of been a theme of the segment here. They've been a high-variance team, win their first 4 games, look impressively doing so, then lose 6 straight, and then look impressive in their last 2 games against 2 solid teams in Wake Forest and Georgia Tech. What Duke team are we going to get? The one that won and looked impressively in their 6 games, or the one that was on that 6-game losing streak? Another one where I think the best option right now, at least from value aspect, as far as I'm concerned, at the current 5.5 number, I would be more inclined to get in-game live betting here and just see what type of Duke team, as far as a motivation aspect. If they're motivated and they're ready to play, they're clearly the superior team, and they're going to win and cover this game.
All right, spoiler alert for the last bowl game we're going to talk about here. That's the Cactus Bowl out at Chase Field in Phoenix, Arizona, between Kansas State and UCLA. Kansas State a 2-point favorite in this one. And I can tell you right off the top, Brad, and I don't know, maybe you've got a stronger opinion on this game than I do. I want no part of this game at all.
I bet Kansas State. I don't know if UCLA wants a lot of part of this game. How motivated is Josh Rosen going to play? The line says he's going to play. If he doesn't play, Kansas State should be a bigger favorite, in my opinion. You got issues at Kansas State. They got to figure out what they're going to do at the quarterback spot. But I like what I saw from Thompson the last couple of games of the season. The worry that I have, and back in Kansas State, they have been outgained remarkably in each of their last 9 games. Now, I already think they're up against it because they're conservative. They play a bend but don't break defense. They're conservative on offense. But 9 straight games, they've been outgained. UCLA's been terrible on the road, 0-6 straight up, 1-5 against the number, getting outscored by 17 points per game. Rosen should play in this game, at least that's what the line says, but say they get down, is he worried about getting hurt? Because he's been hurt and banged up a couple of times in his career. You got a Hall of Famer in Bill Snyder, who remarkably isn't a Hall of Famer when it comes to bowl performances against an interim coach in Jed Fish. I just got, in my opinion, UCLA's got more upside, no question about it, and that's why the line's short. But I got, the more consistent team, the more stable team, in my opinion. I like the Wildcats minus the points here, and I did bet Kansas State.
I do think something interesting to follow with this game, this was something that was kind of talked about on Twitter a little bit yesterday, is that Bill Snyder hasn't made a determination on his future. Now, Kansas State did lose their offensive coordinator. He took the job at UTEP. But, Bill Snyder's not sure what his future plans are yet, hasn't committed to the 2018 season. I think either way, if Snyder says I'm coming back, the team's going to be fired up. If Snyder says he's leaving, obviously the team's going to be extremely fired up to send him out a winner. So that Bill Snyder situation is something that you want to watch here, where I think you could get a little bit of a motivational edge, which Kansas State may have anyway, because as you outlined perfectly there, UCLA, how excited are they to be playing a middle-of-the-road Big 12 team? How excited is Josh Rosen to be there? That's the thing for me, is that there are so many intangibles in play with this game, but I would follow that Snyder situation because you could get some sort of motivational line value here based on what his decision is if he announces one prior to this game.
Yeah, and that's not going to happen until probably 24 hours leading up to kickoff. And when you talk about how much would that be worth to line, particularly if it was his last game and that was announced, I don't know if you can really quantify that, but I would say I would factor at least a point or so, even around a key number of 3. You would think that the guy that put this program on the map and the players still love and respect him, I would right now, and look, it's more of a high variance game, but right now I think there's nothing but positive by having a Kansas State ticket. Say all of a sudden in the last couple of days leading up to it, and we saw it with Royce Freeman announcing a couple of days before that he was going to sit out. What if Josh Rosen all of a sudden says, he just has second thoughts and decides he's out of the game? Well, I would much rather have a Kansas State -2, -2.5 ticket than it would be fly right through field goal and probably be up to 4.5 points at the very least, if not 6, if, Josh Rosen's not playing. So to me right now, the only position you should have, until you learn more about what's going to happen, is Kansas State or nothing.
No, I agree. I think you can speculate a little bit in that regard in terms of, you kind of treat it like a stock. You're not entirely sure where the stock's going to go, but you got a pretty good idea that it's going to have some helium to it. So, you take a Kansas State ticket because, like you said, the only thing that can happen for UCLA here in terms of the line is something bad. I don't think that this line, suddenly goes down to a pick 'em or something like that. Maybe there's some market movement if Josh Rosen says, yeah, I'm absolutely going to play. But, like you said, it's built into the line already. So it's not like you're losing any line value if it goes from 2 to a pick 'em or something like that. You handicap the game as if he was going to play anyway. So I think that you're definitely on the right track there in terms of getting out there and grabbing a Kansas State ticket. And I certainly, wouldn't hold it against anybody that grabs one here in case this number moves. Let's transition over to the NFL side here for a couple minutes, talk about a couple of these games here. And this is what I talked about earlier on in the week on Tuesday with Brian Blessing. I want to get your thoughts on it as well. 107-108 here. The Chargers, road favorites of a touchdown now pretty much across the market. The 6.5s do have some juice on them. as they go cross country to take on the New York Jets. I'm not seeing it here, Brad. I understand not wanting to back the Jets because, who knows what their mindset is. There's no way in hell I'd lay this number with the Chargers.
I'm with you. I'm definitely on the home dog. I think they're slow out of the gates, early start time, cold temperatures, the playoffs. You can say that they still have a chance, but, we're talking Dumb and Dumber, so you're telling me there's a chance. The Chiefs have wrapped up the division. You got to give the Jets, for a team that's supposed to tank, quote-unquote tank this season. They're 8-3-1 against the number of last 12 games, 6-1 against the number at home. I'd love to have McCown, obviously, instead of Petty. But, to me, it's Jets or nothing. Definitely, they're the only way to go in this one. I can't build a case for the Chargers other than, I absolutely hate, Bryce Petty and the Jets. And even last week when everyone was throwing them in the trash, they got to cover against a much superior New Orleans team on the road.
Yeah, it's just that there's so many things. And not only that, it's the early kickoff, and it's week 16. Like, guys are beaten up. Guys are tired. Guys are, for the Chargers, like you said, they still have this outside shot at the playoffs. But there are some guys that would just rather – they're looking forward to being home with their families for the holiday. You got this long trip late in the year. I don't see where there's a whole lot of motivation for the Chargers because they have to know, mathematically we're not eliminated, but it doesn't look good for us. And if the Jets just run the football here, and the Chargers have a terrible run defense. I think it's the third worst in the NFL in yards per carry. If the Jets can run the football with any level of success here in this game, minimize possessions, shorten the game, take away what the Chargers do really well defensively, play the field position game, hang around in this one, I just don't see any recipe for a blowout unless Bryce Petty is really awful and he's inexplicably able to decide this game. Because if I'm the Jets, I'm running the football 75, 80% of the time and just letting my offensive line and my backs do the work.
Absolutely. If you're concerned about Petty throwing a bunch of picks, we'll take the ball out of his hands. And we've seen teams actually do that. We've seen Jacksonville take the ball out of Blake Bortles' hands here, and I think that's the way to go. And look, if you're questioning motivation, well, that usually shows up, in my opinion, on defense as far as run defense. You can break the will of a team by running right at them, especially if they're not motivated. So, yeah, I like it, and I particularly like it that the lines, you can get yourself a +7 out there. If you're looking for the Jets, you might have to pay a little bit more juice, but obviously that's a hell of a lot more attractive than the 6.5.
All right, let's go to game 115, 116 here. This is the biggest one in the 1 o'clock time slot between Atlanta and New Orleans. New Orleans, 5.5-point favorite. The Chris books up to 6 now. Bovada also at 6. Still a handful of books out there at 5.5. Interesting. These two teams just played each other a couple of weeks ago in that Thursday night game. Atlanta came away with the victory in that one. These two teams should be ticketed for the postseason. You got any interest in this one?
I do. I really like New Orleans in this one. And, number one, I thought for the most part they outplayed Atlanta in that game. Even despite the fact they lost Kamara at running back, they were on the short end of a bunch of calls. Now, I know Matt Ryan had a despicable game throwing 3 picks, but, Drew Brees doesn't throw a late interception in the end zone. New Orleans probably wins that game outright. I think it's a good situational spot for them. They're coming off a low-effort game against the Jets. The Falcons' short travel week, I thought it was a closer and much more physical game than expected against Tampa Bay. I think the revenge factor is big here. In New Orleans, when they have a winning team and they're at home and they got a winning record, how about 17-4-1 against the spread? I like the Saints a lot here. In my opinion, they cover the 5.5. Probably one of the only favorites I'll play this week in the NFL. Even though if you've been backing favorites in the NFL since week 7, I think you've hit like 63%. I like a lot of dogs. I think there's a lot of point spread inflation, maybe even slightly some here, but Saints are one of the very few favorites on my back this week.
Look at you being Mr. Joe Public. I think that you've been paying too much attention here over the last 8 weeks when favorites are just crushing everything.
Yeah, well, I would love to have known that prior. It's remarkable the fact that you have basically a half of a NFL regular season, and the favorites covered 63% of the time. And I think it's built into a lot of numbers this week, particularly teams with playoff need. against teams that are supposedly shutting it down. You're seeing point spread inflation. Top of it, I think the books are tired of getting killed. I mean, even last week, the favorites covered a majority of the games, but how about straight up, every single favorite one straight up, so not a lot of variance. I think we might be due for a topsy-turvy type weekend. I hope it doesn't happen with the Falcons winning this game outright. But I think just across the board, when you look at like Baltimore laying at 13.5, I mean, that number, in my opinion, is inflated. I mean, Detroit last week's laying 5 at home to Chicago. Now they're laying 5 on the road against Cincinnati. To me, that's inflated. We just talked about the Chargers. That's a little bit inflated. The Rams, after their big blowout win over the Seahawks, laying a full touchdown against Tennessee. I just, to me, I'm going to be on a lot of dogs. I know if I've been backing dogs, I've been getting my teeth kicked down my throat, but I think we're due for a week in the NFL where the dogs, might have out of 16 games, might cover 11 of the 16.
Yeah, maybe they'll have a little bit of bark here this week. Brad Powers from BradPowersSports.com. What's going on over at the website right now, bud?
Yeah, if you go to BradPowersSports.com, as always, I talk about it each and every week here, but if you're interested in my newsletter, first off, you can download all past issues for free if you go to BradPowersSports.com. Put it together each week, put my heart and soul into it. We give you a game write-up on every single college and NFL game, along with top plays of the week, power ratings, bad beats from the week before, records, trends, you name it, we got it in there. And if you like what you see, it's $30. Not for this week, not for just the bowl games, college football only or NFL only. We're talking college football and the NFL all the way through the Super Bowl. You get it emailed to you each and every Wednesday, $30 through the Super Bowl, BradPowersSports.com. It's the Powers Picks newsletter.
And you can follow Brad on Twitter at Brad Powers and the number 7. Brad, appreciate your time as always, sir. Thank you so much. Merry Christmas to you and yours, bud, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Right back at you, buddy, and to all the listeners out there. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to each and every one of you out there.